Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to go beyond the headlines, pulling out the key insights from really complex stories. Today we're looking into one of India's most baffling, frankly chilling unsolved murders, the case of Shivani Bhatnagar. She was this incredibly fearless investigative journalist. Her life was cut short, tragically, and, well, her death just unleashed this firestorm. Speculation touching the highest levels of power, personal scandal. It had everything. We're going to sift through the sources, dissect these two starkly different alleged motives that still cast a really long shadow.
And that, for you, our listener, is really the core challenge, isn't it, in cases like this one? When you're faced with stories, narratives that just flat out contradict each other, trying to get through those layers of information to find, some kind of truth. It's incredibly tough. It's more than a puzzle. It's a real test of critical thinking, especially with high-profile people involved, intense media focus. It complicates everything.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to really unpack the sources we have on the Shivani Bhatnagar murder case. We want to distill the crucial insights. Why did this case grip the nation, and how does it keep raising questions, about justice, power, hidden truths? Okay, let's jump right into the heart of this mystery. So to really grasp these diverging theories, we first need to understand who Shivani Bhatnagar was. She wasn't just like any reporter. She was a principal correspondent for the Indian Express, a major respected newspaper, and a key member of their special investigative team. So think top of her game, tenacious. Her work involved regularly uncovering and reporting on various scams, corrupt, and that really established her as, well, a formidable and quite fearless journalist in India. Now, the circumstances of her death, pretty grim. It was 1999. Shivani was found murdered in her apartment, East Delhi. And what immediately struck investigators, no signs of forced entry. Zero. Which wasn't suggesting a random break-in, right? Pointed towards attackers who maybe she knew, or used some kind of trick to get inside is another strange detail. The room was apparently ransacked, but after the murder. But here's the kicker. Nothing specific was ever identified as missing. So that left this weird void. Made the motive even harder to, pin down initially.
And what's clear right away from our sources is this was not some ordinary crime. Not at all. The case quickly sent ripples. I mean, it impacted the highest echelons. Indian politics, law enforcement. That alone tells you, our listener, the sheer scale we're dealing with here. It wasn't just a local police matter. It became a national story. Intense media scrutiny, immense pressure on everyone involved. And in a place where, let's be honest, the lines between power, influence, and media can sometimes blur, well, a case like this could potentially expose a lot more than just one crime.
Okay, so with those initial facts on the table, the investigation pretty quickly focused on a, let's say, controversial figure, IPS officer Ravi Kant Sharma. And with him came the prosecution's first big theory, a very political one. Just for context, an IPS officer that's Indian Police Service holds a senior position, significant authority, public trust, social standing. It's a big deal. So the prosecution alleged that Sharma had reportedly leaked politically sensitive legal documents to Bhatnagar. And these weren't just any old papers. The sources specified they related to the St. Kitts case. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, the St. Kitts case was this major financial scandal back in the late 80s, early 90s. Allegations of illegal offshore accounts, high-level political figures potentially involved. It was dynamite, really sensitive stuff. So the core of the prosecution's argument was this. Shivani Bhatnagar refused to give these documents back to Sharma. And not only that, she apparently intended to use them as, quote, leverage against him.
Right. And the takeaway here, I think, is that volatile mix. Power, secrets, media. Just imagine the pressure. A high-ranking public servant, an IPS officer. What if a journalist has documents linking him even indirectly to a scandal like St. Kitts? Documents that could cause huge political damage. That word leverage is so loaded, isn't it? It implies the stakes were incredibly high. Exposure could have been devastating, career-ending, possibly worse. So this alleged refusal by Bhatnagar to return them, her reported intent to use them, from the prosecution's viewpoint, it put Sharma in a desperate corner. It's almost a classic scenario, really. Control of information becoming potentially a matter of life and death in that political world.
That's a really critical point.
Yeah.
This first motive, the one the prosecution pushed, it paints a picture, doesn't it? A calculated murder, driven by desperation to get back damaging information. And crucially, to stop it from being used publicly against someone powerful. It's about containing a scandal, shutting down a potential leak, eliminating the person holding the key. It speaks to that darker side of power in politics. Okay. But here's where things take a sharp turn, a really dramatic twist, because we have a completely different story coming straight from Ravi Kant Sharma himself. He flatly denied the prosecution's claims, the sensitive documents, the political leverage. He rejected that whole theory outright. Instead, Sharma offered a totally different narrative, much more personal. He claimed he'd had an intimate relationship with Shivani Bhatnagar. So if you follow Sharma's version, the motive wasn't political secrets at all. It came from this much deeper personal conflict. His alternative theory, that Bhatnagar was allegedly planning to expose their relationship. And this, he claimed, was something he desperately opposed.
Not just personally, but because it posed a massive threat to his, quote, social standing.
And this really brings up an important point, doesn't it? How personal lives can just collide, sometimes violently, with public careers and reputations, especially perhaps in certain cultural contexts. For a high-ranking officer like Sharma, in a society where public image, perceived morality carries immense weight, exposing an intimate relationship could be absolutely catastrophic, professionally, personally, utter disgrace, especially if it, clashed with his public image or family life. So Sharma's narrative flips the motive entirely. It's not state secrets, it's deep personal shame. It's about protecting public image at all costs. It describes a different kind of desperation, definitely, but one potentially just as powerful, just as destructive.
Yeah, it really highlights the different kinds of pressure, doesn't it? One story points to the cold, hard world of political power, information control. The other, to the intense, maybe raw desperation of protecting reputation, social standing. Two very different kinds of desperation, maybe leading to the same awful outcome. It's almost impossible to square them. And that's exactly the dilemma we're left grappling with. These two incredibly potent yet totally conflicting narratives, they cast this deep, unsettling shadow, uncertainty over the real reasons behind Shivani Bhatnagar's death. The courtroom, from all accounts, became this stage, this arena, where this tangled mess of secrets, betrayals, hidden motives played out for years.
And it presented just a huge challenge for the legal system, almost insurmountable, you could say. Our sources call the trial tediously long. It stretched out year after year. These complex, contradictory stories being presented, argued, pulled apart. But ultimately, the final legal outcome was that Ravi Kant Sharma was acquitted by the High Court. Why? Lack of evidence. And that's a critical detail. Legally speaking, definitive, irrefutable proof of motive, of guilt, it was never established. The evidence, despite that long, intense trial, just wasn't strong enough to meet the legal bar.
So what does this all mean for us looking back for the case itself? I mean, despite this huge, high-profile trial that gripped the country, a definitive, legally proven motive for Shivani Bhatnagar's murder was never actually established, never confirmed by the courts. The mystery just endures, leaving us with these two starkly opposing theories, one political, public, the other intensely personal, private, but no final answer the law could stand behind.
Yeah, and if you connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights the profound, often frustrating implications. Especially for cases where the core motivations stay ambiguous, even after the whole judicial process plays out. It forces us to confront the limits, sometimes, of legal systems in finding the absolute truth, particularly when you have such conflicting stories and maybe a lack of that smoking gun, that irrefutable piece of evidence. The legal process might close a file, but it doesn't always give you all the answers. It leaves the public, and history really, wrestling with these unresolved questions.
And so that brings us toward the end of this deep dive into the Shivani Bhatnagar murder case. We've seen the core elements, an investigative journalist's life cut tragically short, two completely opposing motives offered up, one political, involving sensitive St. Kitts documents, the other deeply personal, about a relationship and the threat to a powerful man's standing, and ultimately an acquittal that left the truth, well, buried in speculation.
Exactly. And that's where we'll leave you today, with perhaps a final thought to mull over. What does it actually mean? For justice, for truth, for how we understand power and reputation, when, as one source puts it, the truth is buried beneath layers of speculation and intrigue, even after the legal system has done its work. It makes you ponder, doesn't it? The weight of evidence, the power of a public image, and those enduring questions that some cases, like Shivani Bhatnagar's, leave echoing long after the headlines fade and the courtroom's empty. It's maybe a reminder that not all mysteries get tied up neatly.